The next square in a Voyage East knit-along is a bonsai tree. In this video, I will share with you tips for weaving in all of those long strands that are hanging on the wrong side of the work. Here I'm going to demonstrate weaving in the ends on the wrong side of the square. I will show weaving in vertically, horizontally, and diagonally. You can start weaving them in either from the bottom of the square up to the top or the top to the bottom. I always prefer to go from the bottom up because that's the way you knit, from the bottom up, so it just kind of seems natural for me to do it that way. First thing I'm going to do is to get rid of the strands at the top of the square, so I can just focus on those strands here at the bottom so they don't really get in the way when I'm trying to weave them in. So I'm going to get rid of some of those strands, and I'm going to start with the bottom, which is the cast on edge. Before you get started, you want to make sure that you have a yarn needle. I have one here with a large eye on it. This yarn is a little bit on the thick side. I do like the curved point. It can be a flat point if you want. And a good pair of small, sharp scissors. That will help when cutting the yarn to have them sharp and small because these areas are rather small. The first technique I'm going to show you is starting with the cast on tail. As I mentioned, you can either start from the bottom or the top. I like to work from the bottom up, so I'm starting at the cast on edge. So notice that this tail is somewhat long, and it's a good idea to try to trim those tails to about 8 inches long, which is about this long. So I'm going to take my scissors. So before sewing them in, you want to cut the very long tails to about 8 inches long. It just makes it easier to manipulate the yarn. So first you're going to thread the needle. And in this case, I'm going to be working horizontally. Let me turn it around so I can show you the direction in which I'd be weaving it. And I'm going to weave them through the loops of the cast on edge along the very bottom edge. This is a good place to hide them because you will be seaming along this edge, and so they'll be completely hidden. So I'm going to go through the bumps on I look at the cast on edge, through the purl bump closest to me, pull it through, not too tightly, and then go from the top down into the next bump and pull it. And then you just want to continue going back and forth from bottom to top and top to bottom along this cast on edge. And that's why it's called weaving. It's like a weaving technique. You can skip a stitch now and again. You don't have to do absolutely every stitch. And you want to weave it at least an inch or two across so that you know it's firmly, that strand is firmly attached into the fabric. There's no way it's going to pop out and unravel. Then you take your nice scissors, and here you can cut it quite close to the fabric, just as I'm doing here. And it's completely invisible, woven in. You cannot see it on the right side. And that is the horizontal strand. Now that cast on edge is one of the cast on and bound off edge are the easy edges because they're nice, neat edges. So here I've come to a spot where I had to join the red, and you can see there's a little bit of a hole there. So in order to close up this hole, you need to weave the ends in opposite directions. So I'm going to take, as you see, I threaded this side of the red, and I'm going to pass it over the other red. And I'm going to weave horizontally into the bumps of the red yarn only, not the yellow, the red. Up and down for an inch or so until you think you have it's well secure and you have enough red yarn still. Then you're going to take the other side and weave it through in the opposite direction, and I'll show you the right side in a minute. So I'm going to go back a little bit into this red stitch here because I don't have so many red stitches here, and I want to not go in the same direction as the other thread, and I'm going to just find a loop of red yarn and weave it through over several stitches. Here I'm going to just find a spot that's kind of hidden. And there, that should be just fine. So if you look on the wrong side, on the right side, that hole is no longer there. You have fixed it by crossing those two strands over and weaving in the opposite direction. Now I'm going to demonstrate weaving in vertically. So I have the dark charcoal yarn and I'm going to weave up through these stitches on the right hand side. So again, I'm going to turn this around a little so you can, I'm going to go look for a nice stitch underneath here, in and out. It's very important that you weave it back and forth because that's the most secure way. If you could keep doing it like a whip stitch, but it's not going to keep it as secure. So find something underneath, stitch to hide, and then go in through this loop, always going through the same color. Now this is interesting. Look what's happened here. There is this loose strand which is somehow had to go from this stitch over to that stitch, and I should have stranded it across as I showed in the video before. I should have been catching this strand every 3 stitches or so, but apparently I did not. So I have this loose stitch here. So I am going to secure it down so it doesn't get caught on fingers or whatever. So I'm going to just kind of fake it and work around it and try to attach it. Let's see, go this way and attach it so that it is no longer a long float. So when you get to these kind of places, and if you see another hole, you can find ways of the weaving in stitches to fix that yarn. Now, if it were a much longer float or much longer strand, I could have cut it in the middle and then you could weave both sides, but it was too short of a strand. If I had done that, I would have not enough of the strand left to weave it in. So I've done it like that through the back, and it is now relatively flat, and I can just cut it off. So I'm going to show you a little bit more of weaving on the diagonal. I have this gray or charcoal thread, and I'm going to weave it along this diagonal edge, again going through loops of the same color, going back. I'm going to go under this one here. There's no real right or wrong. You just want to be sure that you are weaving enough of the long enough that it's going to never pop out, and you want to go in as many alternate directions as you can. I'm going to show you another option for weaving in ends if maybe you don't have a yarn needle available, or this is also a good method to use if you have a shorter strand, is by using a crochet hook. And you use what you do is you insert the hook underneath your loop and use it to catch that strand and pull it through. So you want to work around. In this case, I think I'm going to go across the top here. So insert your hook into a loop, pull the yarn through. You could actually use this technique for all your weaving in ends if you want to. I find it goes a little bit slower, but it is a very good way to weave in the ends. And again, if you are somewhere and you don't actually have a needle to use, you can just use that hook and you just keep looping it through, going sometimes from this angle. And some people really do like using a crochet hook for all of it. I find it a little more tedious. I like the needle better, but it is just as good a technique as using the needle. Now my ends are all woven in except for the tail from the bound off edge. So I'm going to show you how to complete this weaving in ends on this swatch along the bound off edge. So just as we did on the cast on edge, you're going to weave into the loop just under the bound off edge, back and forth, over about an inch or so of stitches. Up and down. I like to go in every stitch. If you want to skip a stitch now and again, that's okay. So maybe one or two more stitches. And that completes your woven in squares. Your woven in ends for this particular square. Cut it off and voila. Now my ends are all woven in, and as you can see, it is a great improvement from when we started. Remember, we will be seeing the back of the afghan, so finish off your ends as neatly as possible using any or all of the 3 techniques that I have demonstrated here.